former congressman and current presidential candidate Will Hurd joins me live now on Top Story. Congressman Hurd, what's your reaction to this indictment?
Well, my reaction is simple, and it's a continuation of something I said last weekend. Donald Trump is not running for president to make America great. He's not running for president to represent the people that voted for him in 2016 or 2020 or who donated to his campaign. He's running to stay out of prison. And the fact that $3 out of $4 of his campaign, people that donate to his campaign, go to paying for his legal fees is outrageous to me. And the fact that more candidates are so afraid of challenging Donald Trump and being upset by this is nuts to me. And the bottom line for me is that let's take away the names, let's take away the letters after the names. Is this the kind of behavior that anybody would want from a president, whether it's Republican or Democrat? And the answer is no. And I appreciate that you are innocent until proven guilty, but also nobody is above the law.
So, Congressman Hurd, then what's happening with your party? Because he's leading in the polls, and he's not leading in the polls like he was in 2016. He's leading in the polls by a monster margin.
Look, I recognize that he is a leading candidate. Joe Biden, obviously, a leading candidate on the other side. 2/3 of Americans want neither one of them on the ballot. People want something different. Here's the thing that we got to remember about polls. Polls is a snapshot in time. Running for president is not one election. It's 50 elections. And we have 24 weeks before the first vote. And here's what people are recognizing. People that have voted for Donald Trump both times are sick and tired of his baggage and recognize that if they're frustrated with how DOJ is operating or the FBI, if they're frustrated with Joe Biden and what Hunter Biden is doing, they realize that the worst person to litigate those issues is the person that has so many indictments already and probably more. So I think you're going to see things evolving as we get closer to the election. And guess what? We're going to see this hopefully on the debate stage. And folks want to see these things brought in front of Donald Trump. Help me make that requirement and go to hurdforamerica.com and donate at least $1.
Yeah, Congressman Hurd, I hear you say that about the polls, but I also want to roll some video from an event this weekend in Iowa. I won't need to remind you, you were there, you lived through it, but our viewers may not be familiar with it, so let's watch.
Donald Trump is not running for president to make America great again. Donald Trump is not running for president to represent the people that voted for him in 2016 and 2020. Donald Trump is running to stay out of prison. And if we elect Donald Trump, we are willingly giving Joe Biden 4 more years in the White House, and America can't handle that. God bless you, and God bless America.
Congressman Hurd, you said what you said right here on this program, and you were booed by Iowa Republicans. What's going on?
Well, look, there were some boos, of course, but there were also some people that didn't move, and there were some people that actually clapped. And the people that I was talking to are the folks that believe in personal responsibility. The people that I was talking to are the people that believe service matters. The people that I was talking to by saying those statements are the people that believe in common sense. And there's more of those folks. And you can't be afraid of Donald Trump, but we also got to be articulating a vision for the future. People are frustrated with the direction of the country. They want someone who's working and dealing with complicated issues that we're dealing with now, whether that's the Chinese government trying to surpass the United States of America as the global superpower, or artificial intelligence going to upend every single industry, not in 10 years, but in 2 to 3 years. These are the things people want us to focus on. But guess what? If we're talking about Donald Trump's indictments, if we're talking about the problems with Hunter Biden, we are unable to talk about these issues that are required to make sure that this experiment called America lasts for another 247 years. Those are the people that I'm talking to. Those are the people that we need to show up. Let's go back to 2020. The lesson of the 2020 election was don't be a jerk and don't be a socialist. The lesson of the 2022 election was candidates actually matter. And the fact that Donald Trump is a proven loser, he lost the House in 2018, he lost the White House and the Senate in 2020, and he prevented a red wave from
Congressman
coming forward.
Hurd,
we need to make sure we're electing someone that can target these new voters.
The debate is less than a month away. Will you make that debate stage?
Mm-hmm. I'm getting close. I'm working there. If your viewers want to see me on there, hurdforamerica.com, donate at least $1. I'm feeling confident about hitting the requirements to do that. And then, Donald Trump hasn't agreed to whether he's going to be on the debate stage.
I do. Before you go, though, if the former president is on that debate stage and you're on that debate stage as well, you qualify, what will you tell former President Trump when you see him face to face?
I'm going to tell Donald Trump that, you're defrauding your supporters by taking $3 out of every $4 and using it for your campaign is not making America great. You're not focused on the future of the country. You're worried about not dying in prison. He's 78 years old, and if any one of these counts he's found guilty, he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. That's what he's focused on, and that's not acceptable. That's not what the American public deserve. And if we elect him, if Republicans elect him as a GOP nominee, we are giving 4 more years to Joe Biden.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.